Hey, it's Sammy for another episode of the IdOMUSIC podcast, and our goal and our mission is to empower and educate musicians and artists worldwide. And on today's episode, we sat down with photographer and journalist Julia Beverly discussing creating the voice of the South with Ozone Magazine, going on to write Pimp C's story, and helping publish J.Prince's memoir, and her love for new adventures. Hey, it's Sammy for another episode of the IdOMUSIC podcast, and I'm sitting down with music journalist, photographer. I really don't have much of an introduction because you'll know her when you hear Julia Beverly. How you doing?
I'm good.
You good?
That was a good introduction.
Yeah. It was just like, you've done so many things. Obviously, most people are going to know you from Ozone Magazine, which was a very classic. The voice of the South is how you actually described it. Let's get into the beginning of who Julia Beverly really is, though. I know you're from Florida, or you end up moving to Florida, so you spent most of your time there. Just talk about growing up. How did you even stumble across hip hop? Like, what was the discovery of hip hop for you?
Discovery of hip hop would have been 11th grade. And I mean, I have a very different background from a lot of people. I was homeschooled.
Oh, really?
Moved around a lot. So I didn't really go to like a real school till 11th grade. So I was probably about 14.
Oh, wow.
And I had an art class that was like the way they had it set up, it was like once or twice a week for like 3 hours, like a long block of time. And so that was like the highlight of the week. Like, you hated every other class, but art class was like, that was a fun class. So, cause I love to draw and paint and all that. And so there were a couple guys who sat next to me in that class, and the teacher was cool. He would let us play music and all that kind of stuff. So I remember they had brought in the Outkast, the ATLiens album, because it had the cartoon strip in the insert. And so they were like, drawing off of that, but they would play the album. And, I had been very sheltered prior to that. So I didn't really know anything about hip hop. I mean, or just pop culture, period. Like anything that happened from like up till like 95, like movies, music.
You was out the
even
loop.
Today, I'm like I never saw that movie. I can't relate, But I was starting to get into I was into like Nirvana, kind of grunge was kind of like the thing at the time, so I was into that a little bit. But I just remember hearing that first Outkast album. Well, for me, it was the first album, and it was cool because that was the album that had so many like sound effects. Like you had like the splash in the pool and like the spoken word, and like, so I don't think at that time I didn't know that it was hip hop or that hip hop was like a thing.
Right.
I just heard it and was like, I
like that.
Different. It's like dope. So I think I had probably dubbed it onto a tape or something, and I wasn't even allowed to, like, my family's very religious, very strict. So, anything I was going to listen to, I had to get like the boombox on very low and be in the room, like the door locked, like that type of thing. So, that was really my introduction. And then I got into Tupac, and I just really related to him, even though like now listening to, the things he was talking about, obviously he came from a totally different background.
Yeah, of course.
He was talking about it from a different perspective, but I could relate to a lot of things he was saying. And, that was my introduction. And then it really originally when I started Ozone was in Orlando magazine. So if you look back like at the very early issues, it was a lot of reggae, a lot of Hispanic music, reggaeton. Like Orlando's very Hispanic, Caribbean.
Right.
But as we started to grow, that's kind of when the Dirty South movement was like taking over. And so we were starting to hit, Mississippi, Texas, starting to hit Atlanta. And I was starting to see like, okay, there's really a movement here, like something's really happening. And so it kind of transitioned into a Dirty South magazine.
So like, I wanted to ask you, because you talk about early on with your knowledge, or like what you actually were listening to begin with was like rock. And then it kind of moved into hip hop when you met your classmate. You start listening to Outkast, Tupac, and so on and so forth, right? Would you say, like, especially today, you look at some of the artists like a Ray Sherman or Lil Uzi, and even Outkast, and at that time, that hip hop stars equate to rock stars.
Yeah.
Would you say there's like some similarities there, and that may be why you were drawn to it initially?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's all about the energy, I think, and that's really what captured me was once I started shooting, because I'm a photographer. Like that's really what I love doing. And I think that came from the whole, my background in art. I would always get frustrated because I would draw, like I drew a lot of portraits, and you'd be like 75% done. I'd be like, okay, I love how this is coming out, and then that last little, you do something that just made it not quite right,
it, yeah.
And I think, so when I started doing photography, it was like something clicked because it's so exact. Like you're not going to have like an eye that's a little bit off. Like it's exactly what you see.
Exactly.
And so I started shooting concerts, and really what got me was the free food because, I was like 18, I started, or maybe even younger than that, I started shooting concerts. And went to like a radio station concert. It was like Ja Rule or something back then. But they had the whole backstage, like, free food in the tent. I was like, oh, wow, they're going to feed me too. I was broke at the time. So, the music industry, you always got
find your way.
Events with free food.
Yep.
The cookies at Patchwerk. That's what you come to Patchwerk for. So I lost where we were headed with that.
You were covering the concerts first.
Yeah, I started shooting, and that's what clicked for me, was like this, just seeing even a Ja Rule. I mean, he was huge at the time. So, just seeing the interaction like with the artists and the crowd. And I did shoot some rock, like I think maybe the Vans tour or something like that. I shot very early in my career, and you got people crowd surfing and all. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely, like you said, Uzi and some of the newer artists are they are rock stars, and it's just the music is a little bit different, but the energy is the same.
Got you. So let's go back to Ozone. So you said you started this magazine originally as a portfolio. I was like doing some digging, and you started as a portfolio, which is ironic because I started my platform as a portfolio to get a job. Like I was just like, I just need to figure something out, and now it's like its own thing. Talk about that though, like how Ozone Magazine, first, for those that aren't familiar, how it influenced pretty much hip hop culture, and especially for those artists in the South, how you were starting to get connected with the Atlanta to Texas, especially Houston. We see your influence with Houston, which we'll talk about soon.
Yeah, so I mean, originally, I think I was picturing that somebody would see this magazine and like hire me. And I actually got, Leor Cohen I met very early, in maybe like 5 or 6 issues in. Oh, wow. And he wanted me to come work at Def Jam as a publicist. It didn't really pan out all the way, but like I did, have opportunities. I started shooting some stuff for Vibe and The Source, but eventually I started to see like there's really something here, and let me just stick with this rather than trying to go work for somebody else. Yeah. But it was really just a timing thing, because I was traveling around, and I would go see, Plies, or I would go see, Pitbull, or, later on, it was like Rick Ross, Slim Thug. But I would go see these guys perform, and they didn't have record deals. They weren't in the big magazines. They weren't on the radio at that time. And I would just be at the club, and I'd be the only photographer, only media person there, and watching everybody in the club is shouting along with every word, every song. And I was almost like confused, like, why am I missing something? Like, why is nobody else
seeing
here?
This?
Like, why isn't Vibe here? Why isn't The Source here? Because in my head, I just thought that they had people like everywhere. Yeah. But they really didn't. They were very like New York, centric at that time. So I would just go see these artists, and I was like, they have a real fan base, and nobody's really covering this. And I kind of felt like I was, I don't know what the word is. We were kind of like kindred spirits or something, because I was doing what they were doing. Like, even though I was a journalist and photographer or whatever, but I was on the road with them. Right. So it would be different. Like, when I would sit down and interview Pitbull or whoever, he would know, like, you're doing this like for real. Like, you're not just like some journalist that works in an office from 8 to 5 and you're coming out with a recorder. Like I'm living the life, like I'm on the road like you are. Like, people used to say that to me all the time. Like, your schedule is like worse than a rapper, because I would be at every concert, every event, and just hitting the road. And so that's how I developed a lot of the relationships, because they would just, like a Little John or whatever, he would see me at every event. Like, who is this white girl with the camera, Right. So, just building those relationships. And then as they were, Little John was huge at that time. He started his label. And then, of course, they signed, Scrappy, Trillville, I forget who all they had, but, just building those relationships, and then it's all connected, because I would go to I'd go to a video shoot or something. I'd go to Sierra's first video shoot, and, here pulls up Jeezy. And it was more, I've always found it's not so much about the music as it is just observing. So like Jeezy, for example, I had never heard any of his music, but he pulled up to this video shoot like in a nice car, and everybody's like flocking to him. So of course I'm like, who's this?
Right.
You know? So I think I interviewed him that day, and you know, we did a little feature on him, and I think he told me that was his first interview. But
Wow.
you know, just by watching how people are reacted to in their city, like you can tell a lot about.
Do you feel like you have like an eye for like the it factor, or like an eye for discovery?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you just this too, because you say that you're traveling, and with all of these artists and people that you're interviewing at the time, they weren't quite on yet. They didn't have deals. They didn't. You're speaking about all of these things. But for you at the time, you're just starting this magazine as well. Mm-hmm. You're being an entrepreneur on your own and doing this pretty much, I'm sure, like a one-woman show most of the time. So talk about that. How were you able to fund and figure this out?
Oh, gosh.
How? Because I'm like, I need to know.
There's a lot of miracles.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just had advertising. I mean, we didn't have, we weren't really on newsstands. It was more of a, you know, promotional piece. Right. And I mean, later on, like years later, people were like, oh, you sell the cover or whatever. I'm like, yeah, it's been in the media kit since day one. Mm-hmm. And I got that from my old business partner, because originally we did Orlando Source magazine for like a year. Mm-hmm. And Mert was my business partner. Shout out to Mert. You know, we still talk from time to time, but I think our visions for where we wanted to go were very different. He owned a graphic design company in Orlando, so he's still in Orlando, and you know, that was kind of his focus. And once I started to see like that it could be bigger than that, you know, we went our separate ways, and I started Ozone. But he did give me a lot of game on like how to fund it, and because we had advertisers already from doing Orlando Source, so they stuck with Ozone. So we had clients who would advertise every single month. And that's kind of what helped get us through. I mean, between selling the cover, which is your most valuable asset, and I don't think that, like, I never felt that there was anything wrong with that. You know, right. Like, it's not the New York Times. It's like
something I wanted to ask you. Mm-hmm. You know, I did see that. You know, when you're researching, you're going to see all of the good and the what people perceive as bad, right? So, as a hip-hop writer or a music journalist, do you feel that you were respected in the world of journalism? Because, you know, people or a lot of other journalists are saying, well, that's unethical. This is, ethics and all that. It
was just funny because nobody said anything about that until, like, we had been publishing for probably like 7-8 years, and somebody would be like, well, I heard that you sell your cover. I'm like, yeah, yes. Like everybody knows that. Yeah. It wasn't ever something that was like, something we tried to hide, but it also wasn't like just anybody could buy it. I mean, we had regular contracts with every major label, and you know, it's the same way with if you want to do a mixtape or it's promotion. You know, they understand the value in it. So yeah, I never really thought that there was anything wrong with it. I mean, but honestly, it wouldn't have existed if we didn't sell the cover. I mean, that was.
You didn't go to school for journalism, like specifically to begin with?
No, I actually was. I studied computer science.
Oh wow!
But it kind of school to me, college to me, and it may be different depending on where you go and what your field is. But the things I was doing in real life
mattered more
compared to what. Well, there was no connection. Like because I had like people used to joke that I was Jamaican, and I didn't really get that joke back in the day. But they'd be like, "Are you Jamaican or something?" Because I had like 7 jobs
so many
at one
jobs.
time. Like literally, I mean, I was an accountant, I was a graphic designer,
What?
I was
doing
I was an artist. Like
a bunch of things.
I drew at Disney. Like I worked at a web design company. Like I had so many different.
You drew at Disney?
Yeah, people used to sit and have their portrait drawn. I used to do that.
The caricatures.
It wasn't a caricature. It was actually the portraits by the President's Hall at Disney World. Yeah,
that's kind of dope. That's like random, but
it was kind of dope. Fact. But yeah, the pay was terrible, but it was a cool little job. I was an IT director at an architectural firm. Like I did a whole bunch of things, but you know, the classes that I was taking at that time, like I'd be getting paid to do accounting and taking an accounting class. I was getting paid to do design and photography, taking design and photography classes, and I'm like, there's no connection here. Like the stuff I'm getting paid to do, I'm not learning it in school.
Gotcha.
So I'm paying to take these classes where they're like like I think I took a photography class or design class, and I just remember it was like 2.5 hours long. The teacher like drew a dot on the board, and he was like, "That is the focal point." And then he talked about the focal point for like 2.5 hours, and I was just sitting there like, "Why am I even here? Like, this is silly." So
I feel you.
Yeah,
completely.
college didn't do a lot for me. So
Yeah.
I just
Scrapped it.
I might have even stopped in the middle of the semester. I honestly don't remember, but I just at some point I just stopped going.
can't do it.
And yeah.
Well, early, I asked that because, I mean, do you feel like you weren't necessarily, a lot of journalists had felt some type of way about your ethics, quote unquote. But do you feel like you got more respect from the hip hop community, like from the artists, from the executives, from et cetera? And do you feel like you get that respect now from that side of things?
I mean, yes and no.
Why?
You know what irritates me is like now, because it's so many people, it's more like event access. Because it used to be way easier getting access to stuff because nobody else was doing it. Like
Right.
I have so many photos from like, you know, events that I was the only person at. So I licensed a lot of stuff. Like if you watch Behind the Music, Unsung, like a lot of that stuff is my stuff.
Wow.
So, you know, now today there's 50 photographers, media people trying to get access to every event. And so I feel like I get tried a little bit sometimes where I feel like I've been doing this long enough
Right.
that I should be able to get access to certain
Regardless.
stuff, you know.
Exactly.
So that's the only thing that gets on that irritates me sometimes. But I feel like I do get respect as being a, you know, somebody who kind of helped open ground for a lot of people.
Definitely. I mean, on the outside looking in, it seems like a lot of people, you know, really respect you, young to older artists who have just seen, you know, the impact you've had and what Ozone did and so on and so forth and what you did for a lot of the artists. And I feel like because you disregarded traditional rules, I guess, in a sense, or this is just something I read online, they said that you disregarded traditional rules, which is the whole advertising, the ethics, that space in your writing and within your publication. I think that's what hip-hop music did, though. Hip-hop...
I mean, yeah, I did what worked for us.
Yeah.
You know, if we put...
What's wrong with a non-traditional way of doing things?
I mean, the only thing, like, going back, you know, if I could go back, I mean, maybe we should have had a little, you know, this is a sponsor.
A blurb.
You know, something on the articles, but it was something that never occurred to me because I'm like, we were literally giving out the magazine for free, but the places we were putting it, like we would put it at radio stations, strip clubs, like places where it was reaching key people in the community who are not going to go to Barnes and Noble and purchase a magazine.
Right.
So that's why people wanted to be on the cover, is because it was reaching the key people in every market.
Their
like,
demo. Yeah.
I would literally, like, even when I had like a Corolla or something, and we would load that thing up. It would be like scraping the ground, and we would drive through, you know, up to Atlanta, out to Texas, like stopping. I mean, I got arrested in Mississippi because this is a crazy story, but
What?
we were waiting for the rep. Like we would just pull off the freeway and we'd be like, yo, we're at the Citgo, like come get your boxes. So we had people in every city that would come get it and bring it to, you know, the radio station, the clubs, wherever it needed to be. But I got pulled over so many times because they would always think we had like drugs or something.
Of course. Your car riding low.
Yeah,
it's a box of magazines.
It was like midnight, and I was with two guys, black guy and Spanish guy. We were like waiting in the strip mall for the rep in Mississippi to come get the boxes, and the police pulled up. They thought we had drugs or something. They tore that car apart.
Are you serious?
Literally took the seat out. I mean, cut all the boxes open. It was crazy.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, I cussed at the police, and they said that that's a misdemeanor in Mississippi or whatever.
So they literally arrested you?
Yeah, for real.
That's some bull. That's crazy.
It was my birthday too. That was
wow.
Yeah, that was a long time ago. But yeah, I don't like police very much.
I mean, I'm not the rest of us. Don't worry, I understand. I've been in similar situations where it's just like, come on, really?
Yeah, I had to learn to pick my battles a little more wisely. But
same.
Yeah, we used to do this every month. We used to just load the truck up, and when I say we, I mean sometimes it was just me, but I usually had, you know, there were some other people that Noel and Malik and Smoke, couple guys would roll with me. So shout out to them. And Mercedes and I'm trying to think who else, but we had a very small
Team.
Team. But whether somebody's with me or not, I mean, I would always just make those rounds every month. And like coming back from Texas one time, I think we bought a Tahoe or something, and so it had temp tags and rims and everything. And coming back I-10, I must have got pulled over at least like 4 times.
Of course, in the Tahoe.
And they're looking at, the back is just filled with boxes. They're like, yeah,
what you doing
in there? Yeah.
What you doing?
So yeah, it was a grind.
So why was it important to be the voice of the South during this time? You talk about how there was this source, there was this, and you spoke to it a little bit, but speaking to finding your own lane, I think is the most interesting, because you found like this void that needed to be filled, and you recognized it early on, and you went for what you thought was right at the time. Mm-hmm. How did you talk about just like going out there and like really taking on that challenge? Because people didn't really respect Southern hip hop at the time.
Yeah, no, they didn't. And I mean, I felt the way a lot of the artists felt. And I remember doing interviews early on with like Pitbull and Pimp C and David Banner. Like, they were some of the ones who were very outspoken about like how we were being treated. And so I started to like, I was kind of feeling the same way, because when I started out, I was trying to get the job really with I remember calling XXL and leaving messages like, hey, you guys need some help with your graphic design, like I can help you out. I did used to shoot some stuff for The Source. There was a whole incident that happened with The Source where they didn't pay me for some stuff, and I wrote something about Benzino, and he cussed me out on my voicemail. But there was a couple incidents early on that I had with XXL and The Source where I just, not like they flat out disrespected me, but I just felt like, yeah, they didn't respect me. Like they would kind of, the attitude was kind of like, what did somebody say to me once? He said something to me like, "Oh, you're not from New York, are you?" Like, and so to me, like, it just, maybe he didn't mean it the way it came across. Right. But to me, they always just viewed it as like, either you're from New York or you're from somewhere else. And we don't really care. And I'm like, there's so many other places, like, we're not all grouped together into one. Exactly. Exactly. And so I felt like slighted a few times by certain things that were like said or done to me. And so after a while, I was like, okay, now I'm starting to see like we really have a movement, and people are starting to refer to us as like, oh, you could compete with them. Right. I think that's actually how we eventually we were on newsstands, so we got a distribution deal, and I think it helped because they had declined me, and XXL had Elliot had written something about us in his editorial, like that made it like a competition type thing, and so I copied it and sent it to the distributor, like, you distribute these guys, and they think that we're their competition. We don't even have a distributor. Oh, okay. So I mean, there was really other factors, but that did help. That helped, yeah. It kind of we kind of started to see like, okay, we're kind of on that level. Like we're starting to take advertising dollars away from these major publications that have distributors, and we're making an impact. They were starting to read. I would get feedback from them, like they were reading what we were covering to figure out like, oh, this person's popping in Miami, we need to go interview them. So you would see, like, even if you look back, you'll see Ozone would cover somebody, and then 3 months later they're in every other magazine. Yeah, I mean, you were propelling and like pretty much breaking these artists essentially that weren't being heard. I think that's what was so cool about what Ozone was doing. Also, it was more than a publication. I didn't know this initially until I started reading. I'm like, y'all were doing shows, award shows. There's like, I mean, I know why there were no more award shows, but you were doing like different events around in the cities. I thought that was cool. Why was it important for you to kind of bring it outside of the publication space, like bringing people together in that? I mean, the award show was a natural extension of what we were doing, and I think Jeezy got one of the first awards, and he was like, "Well, I didn't get nominated for any BET awards, but the streets know what's up." Like, this is so it had a reputation as like, this is what the people, these awards are like what the people want, the streets want. So I like that. The Ozone Awards, those were some crazy days. I don't even. How long were you doing the awards before it was we did 3 years, and that was. People have still asked me today, about bringing it back. For real? Like, they asked you to resurrect the magazine, or is that, you say it's no need today though, which with so many readily available platforms, that's exactly how I feel, is that the artists have their own platform. Right. So we used to be the I always tried to like extract ourselves as much as possible. Like it was straight. This is what the artist said. So it wasn't a lot of like opinionated, quoting them type of thing. It was like a straight, this is what they said, word for word, verbatim. And now they have Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat, and the artists are not mysteries anymore. Like there's too much.
I mean, there's barely
out there.
even print, left, and then there's like multiple platforms online. You can visit all these websites. You type in any headline, and you will see. I feel like
artists are overexposed.
Yeah,
like
they're overexposed.
They're not underexposed like they were when we started it. So yeah, I don't think it's the right
move.
I don't think it would be the right move to bring it back. The awards, no, no, that was it would be like months of just getting no sleep, just being stressed out. I don't want to live like that.
Again, you like I did
it. Yeah. I mean, for me, I like to have something to prove. So I did a magazine. I did an award show.
Next.
What's the next,
Why would you say it's important to grow and evolve when things are changing? Because I think a lot of times, I've spoken to maybe the OGs who are very content and not even, I won't say stuck, but like set in their ways, And then I speak to a lot of veterans and moguls who have grown with the industry. You've seen it go from, you listening to your boombox, real low so your mom doesn't hear, but then to streaming on your phone, like you can just pick an album and now I can hear it. How would you say you've been able to adapt with the way things are moving?
I mean, I even see it as even just outside of the industry, because I'm not even sure if I'm in it anymore. I'm like halfway in, halfway out. I mean,
one foot in the door, one foot out.
I rode a bike across the country. Like I go hike, climb mountains and stuff. Like I don't want to be so in that world where you're just completely engulfed by it. I feel like you got to have a little perspective and a little balance. So, yeah, I'm not sure if I'm all the way in it. But as far as the difference between those two types of people, I think it's really more of a personality thing. And I'm somebody who, I need a lot of variety and change anyway. So I get bored with stuff very easily. And I always have to keep trying to transition into something new. So, it's interesting to see like how fast it's transitioned.
Definitely. I mean, well, let's talk about it.
Because I used to shoot film.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like,
I mean, a lot of people now.
I'm even before digital cameras, So
a lot of people now are coming back to the film.
To film, yeah.
And they want to come back to the cassette tapes. And we always talk about that nostalgia in having something physical.
Right.
Do you still try to shoot in film sometimes? Or you strictly, you're like, nah, it's easier?
I mean, but it's just crazy to think about that I used to, like, you have to wait to see what your picture looked like, and you were definitely way more careful with what you shot because you got 24 shots,
Right.
And there's probably stuff that I would have, like, I remember taking, when T.I. came out and dissed Little Flip and he had the poster or whatever, it was like Leprechaun poster. I remember shooting that, and I remember taking that shot, and I was mad that I thought I wasted a shot because I just saw him come out with the poster.
Yeah.
And I'm not understanding what's going on, so I'm thinking it's like a promotional
right
thing. So I remember taking it, and like if it was a digital camera, I probably would have like deleted it or something.
Right.
Like, I don't want a picture promotional poster. But I ended up ended up running in a bunch of magazines and
because it was hilarious.
Once I realized what was going on, because then he came out and did this whole birthday bash or whatever. So yeah, it's just crazy to think that I used to have to wait. I used to work at Eckerd's part-time just so I could develop my...
Wow, Eckerd's.
I think, Eckerd's is like, what, Rite Aid now or something?
Yeah.
But yeah, I used to work there like 1 hour a week just so I would get a discount on like developing my own stuff. So,
right.
Yeah.
7 jobs. You were not playing no games.
Literally.
I found it interesting because we can't just bypass the fact that you rode your bike from Florida to California. But you rode your bike from Florida to California, excuse me. You created a hip-hop magazine, really the voice of the South, which wasn't done at the time. You began writing Pimp C's story back in, I think, 2010.
Yeah, it came out in 2015.
But you were writing for about 5 years doing that. And you, I'm sure, faced criticism from maybe his family or support just like after it was out. No.
Not
I know
really,
your
no.
mom. I know his
I wrote
mom.
it with his mom, yeah.
Yeah, his mom.
His mom and his wife had a long-standing lot of issues, and I understand why. Now that but I honestly went into it fairly and trying to give everybody like
their say.
fair, chance. And yeah, no comment on his wife, but I wrote the book with his mom, who was his manager for most of UGK's career, so she had everything, and I still work with his sons, who are both kind of dabbling in music. And yeah, that was like a passion project, and I didn't expect it would take me 5 years, but but it did, and the book did very well. I was really happy with the response to it, but it's for a certain reader. Like I didn't really make it with the intention of it being like for a mass audience. It's a 700 plus page book.
I know.
So I know that everybody's not going to sit down and read all that.
Yeah. But I mean, aside from just the book, you went on to do like these seemingly challenging things. Just from the outside looking in, not everybody's going to take on a 740-page book. No, I'm definitely not riding my bike from Florida to California. And then going on to work on J.Prince's book. It seems intentional that you take on these challenges, but my question is why, and you may have already answered it by saying the passion project, but why? Why do these things that like seemingly impossible for like the average person?
Like I said, they're I gotta be interested. Like I don't want to be bored, so I don't want to do something I've already done. There would be no like to bring back a magazine. There would be no like challenge in that for me. So yeah, I like to take on things that are difficult. Gives you something to prove.
Well, I want to go back into Pimp C's Trill Life story because it was impactful to many people who love Pimp C, appreciated his music, also were interested in like why he was the way he was. You described Pimp C as polarizing, meaning that, or you go on to say that if he liked you, he liked you. If he didn't, he didn't, right? Which, I mean, most people are kind of like that, but he was very outspoken about it. How were you able to be open and honest in the book without being disrespectful or being too revealing of his like private life? Were you able, because it seemed from the excerpts that I read that you were still able to tell a great deal about his struggles, how he interacted with the people around him, his relationships, so on and so forth, but you still left something to the imagination.
I mean, I really, I had the idea and I was like, let me see if this could work, and I went to Port Arthur and took his mom to dinner and I had this whole like spiel of how I was going to pitch her on doing this book because Bun had already given me a green light. His wife had already given me a green light. So I was kind of nervous. I'd never met his mom, and before I could even start my whole spiel, she was like, whatever you want to do. Like, she was like, he spoke so highly of you. Like, whatever you want to do, like, I'm on board with it. And then the more I started talking to her, and she would be telling me stories from, 20 years earlier, and she would remember, like, well, he was wearing this shirt, and he turned to me and he said this, like, everything just in very, very vivid detail, and she had a great memory, and she was there for so many things that, key moments that happened. So once I talked to her, I knew it was like, this is the right move, and working with her, because there were things that I'd be hesitant to talk to her about, like, I don't know if she's going to talk about his death, but she would be so open about it. So, everything that, as far as his personal life, like you said, I didn't want to be too intrusive, and so everything that's in the book is stuff that she talked about openly. And there was only, a handful of things that she was like, maybe we
put that in there. Yeah.
Yeah. And there were reasons for it, but it wasn't so much like, she wasn't so concerned about, just his personal life. She was pretty open about, and so everything that she was comfortable with, I was comfortable with.
Dope. How did you build the relationship with the hip hop scene or the hip hop culture in Houston specifically, especially when not many people knew at the time of what was going on there. It just seemed like you kind of just have these relationships of Pimp C's story to J.Prince to talking about UGK and so on and so forth.
I think something just clicked once I started spending a lot of time out there. I really love Houston. I love Texas. But I think early on when we started, because we started distributing only in Orlando, and then, like I said, every month we would make the rounds, and they started getting bigger and bigger. So originally, like, we had our little distribution map that would be on the corner of the magazine, and so at one point we were just doing, it was like Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, Louisiana, or something like that. And we had this little map, and we started getting all these angry calls and emails at the office of people. I guess people thought that it was like the South. The map was supposed to be like the South, and so we get all these calls from Texas. Like why are you guys trying to say that Texas is not, and so that was my first, because I didn't really know how big this, there was already like a very big existing hip hop scene in Texas that I didn't know anything about. And so it started to show me like we need to be in Texas, and this is around the time when UGK was sort of having a resurgence because of the whole, Mike Jones, Slim Thug, the whole Swisher House around that time. And I think they had all just signed to Asylum, and Asylum was like putting a big push, which was under Atlantic, Warner Brothers, and they were giving a big push, commercially to all these artists. And so we started doing a lot of stuff with Asylum, and they would bring us out for all the video shoots. And one thing I did very early as a photographer, I started shooting stills for videos, which I don't know if they do this anymore with labels, but labels used to have a very small budget to be like, let's get a photographer and get some photos. So like almost all the early TVT stuff, which was Little John's label, a lot of the Asylum stuff, like they would pay me. I mean, it was like travel expenses basically, but I would come, I justified it because I'm like, okay, I'm going to be on set all day with Lil Jon or with Mike Jones or whoever.
Right, I can get... And
yeah, it kind of, it's different than meeting them at a club, because like you're having lunch together, you got breaks where you're just sitting around kicking it. So that's how I really built with a lot of, not only the artists, but you're also on set all day with their managers and their bodyguards and their homeboys and, the hype men or whatever. So yeah, that was part of it, was that Asylum would bring us out to do a lot of stuff. They actually set up the first Pimp C interview that I did out there. Started to build with J.Prince, and you can't do anything in Houston without his permission. So I don't remember where I met him, probably one of the early video shoots. But yeah, everybody out there, I kind of felt like we again, we were kind of like kindred spirits, because we were just out here like grinding it out,
Yeah, together.
So they would see like, oh, I see you in Atlanta, you in Miami, like you on the road like me.
Yeah.
So.
Was there something special? What is so special about Houston? Like, what would you say? Because you're like, I really just like Houston. I like Texas. I like the vibe there.
I don't know. Yeah, it's just the energy there.
And
there's so much culture, with the whole, even though this, DJ Screw and all that was before me, but, I always loved, and I also loved how they stick together. Like the same with Atlanta would be, in those early days, Atlanta, Miami, like whenever one person was shooting a video, like you could go to a video shoot and meet everybody. So I always loved how they supported each other.
So you actually have a lot of classic pictures on your Instagram. And my fave TBT might have to be the photo of you, and it's captioned, haha, standing on couches with rappers. But these said rappers, is like you, Drake. I mean, you're not the rapper, but you are in the photo, Drake, Tyga, and Nicki Minaj. And this is clearly like, has to be like 2009 to 2011.
That
like
was
maybe
Wayne's going away party. I remember that.
Oh, really? Where was that?
That was in Miami, and he was going to jail, I think, right after. It might have been the Super Bowl. It might have been the Super Bowl. Did the Saints win the Super Bowl?
I have no idea.
That year?
I'm the wrong person to ask about football.
It was something Super Bowl All-Star Weekend in Miami, and Wayne was about to go to Rikers, and this was like the last, hurrah. And the whole Young Money crew was there. They might have shot a video. It might have been the Bedrock video. I don't know. But for whatever reason, everybody was there. The whole crew. So
yeah,
that was a fun night.
I think it's interesting that like you have such legendary pictures or just experiences with these people who are now have had their success, they've had their struggles, they've gone through so many things. How does it feel to see people who you've came up in the industry with facing whether it be success or struggles? But how does it feel for you being like right alongside all of this?
Yeah, I love to see people, come up. I didn't know that Drake was at the first. We talked about this recently. He was at the first, not the first Ozone Awards, but the one we did in Houston.
Really? So
because he's tied in with, J.Prince. Actually linked him up with Wayne and got him signed. So yeah, he was at the Ozone Awards.
Oh, wow.
Of course, he wasn't known or anything at that time. So, if you hang around the industry long enough, you go to these events, like you're gonna. These are the people that are that are on the come up. So.
Right, for sure. Why would you say you do music? Why do you do music? Or why did you do music? I don't know. I don't know how to phrase that one.
I don't know if I do music as much as I document it.
It's a part of it. It's a part of the process.
Yeah.
And I guess I say that because everybody kind of does music somehow, especially if you have a love for it. I don't really know anybody that just doesn't love music. And it's the I Do Music podcast. I had to ask you, like, why do you do this? Why do you feel like you want to be a part of this culture? Or why did you at the time when you were really, like, hard
100%
and...
Yeah. Yeah, it's... I just feel like it needs to be... I have, like, I want to be like a historian, or even if you read like the Pimp C book, it goes into so many other topics. So it's really like I wanted it to be a documentation of that era. So anybody in the future, because I like to read history books. So I like
books.
Yeah, like true life stories. I don't like fiction. I don't want to read any fiction books.
I got you.
But I love reading about just a moment in time or that time period. When you hear about a story that kind of gives you insight into what was happening in the world at that time. So I wanted it to be that.
What gives you the audacity or the confidence, I should say, to take on these challenging projects, or the audacity and the confidence to take on such challenging projects? Because, like I said before, you do some insane things, in my opinion, to ride across the country, hike.
Because
like
it keeps raising the bar for you. Like the more that I've just found, like, I used to be more. I don't know what the word is. I used to be a lot more shy, like not have as much confidence in myself. And so the more that you accomplish just in life, period, like it's all constantly building to where, like, now I feel like I could do anything. Like anything I choose to do, like I know I could do it because I've overcome so many other things. And it's funny because like there was one time I think I was coming back from like the Ozone Awards or something. Like it's just, I mean, those award shows were like, because we produced it all ourselves. Like we didn't, when you see like the BET Awards or something, they're actually subbing it out. They're hiring a production company that does that.
Right.
Like, and we didn't know that or have a budget for that at the time. So, I mean, we did everything ourselves, and it was crazy. Like, and it was a 3-4 day event. So
really?
we had the TJ's DJs music conference. TJ was my partner with the event. So, but it wasn't one event. It was like 20 events.
Oh, wow.
And so we're coordinating all the artist schedules. We're paying for all this. Like it was a lot, it was a lot. And so I just remember coming back from like one of those shows or something. And I think like the escalator was out at the airport and I had my bags and stuff. And
you're just like
looking like, oh my God, I have to carry this stuff. But you say to yourself like, but you know what? I did the Ozone Awards. Like I could do this.
Right.
So it's funny because like it'll pop in my head like every once in a while when you're confronted with like some
adversity.
Obstacle. You're like, come on, you just like you've done it. You rode a bike 100 miles over a mountain in the rain. Like you could do this. You know what I mean? Like you
that. What were you
Awards.
thinking to get like? I
had a little time on my hands. And
by the 90th mile though, like honestly, you had 10 miles left. What were you thinking? Like.
It's a test of your perseverance. It's like a challenge. So I got into cycling because, it was funny because I run a lot. So, I was starting to have knee problems. I went to a doctor and he was like, well, you're doing too much running. You need to balance it out because running develops, this, you need to develop this part of your leg or whatever. You need to do more whatever. So shortly after that, Veronica Vega, who she's an artist, she's signed to Polo and I think Pitbull, but we used to work out with the same trainer or whatever, and I heard somebody was like, yeah, did you hear she's riding her bike to Miami from Atlanta? And I'm like, so I looked at her Instagram or whatever, they had just left like the day before, so I went and bought a bike that day and met them in Macon, and we rode down to Miami. It took 2 weeks, and but it's funny because since I got into cycling, it actually fixed my legs. Right. So now I kind of balance, running and cycling. But and cycling is great as you get older because it's not as high impact, on your body. But so after that, I had a little time on my hands. I was a little bored. I signed up for this trip. With a charity group, Bike the U.S. for MS, a 2-week trip down the coast of California, which is gorgeous. Like if you have 2 weeks to do something like that, do San Francisco to LA, or San Francisco to San Diego. So when I got to San Diego, they had another group that was going across the country, and I'm like, like I'm here, I'm in shape, I got my bike, I don't have any major commitments, like I could actually do this, like, because I had always thought, when I saw Forrest Gump, I was like, oh, I want to run across the country one day, you know, like I just like doing
stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's
so
dope.
Since then, I've done I did Seattle to Key West, I biked across Spain, I biked through the UK, but yeah, you'll come across these days, like I had one day in the UK where the UK is very, it's not like the US when the mountains and the roads are they're very steep. So it's not at an easy grade.
Right.
You know, and so most of the people that were on this trip, like they were used to it. I'm not used to riding 18% grade uphill.
Right.
Yeah. And there was one day when I got stuck. It was like the longest day. It was like 80 something miles, and I got stuck at the top of this mountain where it was like pouring rain. It was freezing cold. I was soaking wet, like, and so I started like yelling at myself, like, I want to go home, you know. And then I was like, but do you really, like,
right?
Because what would you be doing if you're at home? Like you just
be
like,
sitting there.
You have these moments, like when you do a trip like this, like it's hard, you know. You go through these challenging times, but then you'll have these moments where, like, so I finally, you know, you come to the top of a hill and you come down, and then the weather clears and you have this crazy view of everything, and you have these like moments where you're just like so happy to be alive, like this is awesome, and you're like flying downhill or whatever. So I was just thinking about it. I'm like, you know, when I'm doing these trips, or like when you're traveling or you're doing something hard, like yeah, you have your ups and downs, but you have those moments where you're like, wow, this is beautiful. Awesome. Like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
So, you know, when you just have a regular, go about your daily life, I'm like, how often do you have that moment where you're just like, wow, I'm so lucky, like, to be alive?
That's very true. I'm happy you said that.
So I'll take the ups and downs over just
flat.
Exactly.
I feel you completely. So my question, and this is like, I typically ask women how their experiences being, you know, especially at the time where you're probably like one of the only photographers, but then you're the only woman photographer, then you're probably the only white woman photographer in a hip-hop urban dominated space. But I read something online, which is, it pissed me off, to be completely honest, about an Oakland rapper who made these allegations about you as a woman.
He was trying to holler and he couldn't get anywhere, and so he said some stuff he shouldn't have said
online.
So, yeah.
But
you know, and then he came up to me privately and apologized. So if you're gonna say some things that first of all aren't true publicly, then you need to retract it publicly. Don't come up to me personally.
Facts.
Yeah. So
I've experienced similar things to where, like, you know, if a guy is trying to approach me, and then I don't give them any play, then they end up either getting upset, right?
Yeah.
But then you hear the other part of it, like behind every successful organization, there's a woman, and I mean, in your case, in front of the organization, in front of this publication, is a woman. How has it been challenging gaining that respect from women too? Well, before we go there, how can you combat that type of behavior? Do you brush it off, or are you simply like, you know?
I mean, that particular situation, he was completely out of line, because I had booked some shows for him. Like, I'm getting you paid.
Right.
You know, and I remember one of those shows I went, and he actually, and we're talking about Mr. Fab.
Yes, we're talking about Mr. Fab. I'm sorry.
Because there's other Oakland rappers that I have good relationships with.
I'm sorry. I meant to say his name. It just kind of blew me, the whole situation.
No, he was always throwing sideways comments at me and stuff like that. But I booked him for a show where he got paid, and I went to the show, and he literally, like, we were in the elevator going to the show, and he physically, like, put hands on me that wasn't cool. You know, situation wasn't cool. So, and then we stepped out of the elevator and we go to the radio station, and he's like making jokes at the station, like, oh yeah, we just, you know, I just was in the room with her and she whoop-de-whoop. Like, no, it's
No,
not
that's
even
not
that
what
kind of
happened.
situation.
Right.
So yeah, he was completely out of line. So,
Yeah.
I feel like being in entertainment, it's a little different than like the bar is a little, I don't know if it's higher or lower, but there's things you would tolerate that you might not tolerate in an 8 to 5 office workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And you just have to accept that if you're going to be in the business. Like, guys are going to make sideways comments to you or whatever, but there is a line, and in that situation, the line was crossed. And so I don't have any dealings with that person anymore.
Right.
Even though if you want to come up and apologize, privately, you still did what you did.
Right.
And that's why he never made it. That's why probably most of you never heard of him, right?
Yeah, because I was like, I don't know who this is, but yeah, regardless, it's
so yeah,
men
there's
doing
been
that.
situations. I
It's
mean,
men
and
doing
people always say that, like, oh, rappers must hit on you or whatever. Like, I mean, of course, you're in the club with them. It's 3:00 in the morning. They're a little drunk. I mean, so after a while, I learned to just, most of that stuff, I just don't take it personally, because you're female. You're in those situations. You're gonna get hit on,
Right,
So if the line isn't crossed,
I'm okay.
it just is what it is. But there's the occasional situation where you got to be like, no.
Right. Let me ask you though, have there been times where you used the traits of being a woman to your advantage, like dealing with artists, or I mean, the traits I talk about, nurture. We're nurturers. We're comforting. Sometimes they're around a bunch of men, so they might want to get your opinion.
It adds a different. I mean, I've toured for a while with different artists. Like, I was Flo Rida's videographer. I had some great experiences traveling with him, because he's huge in like places I've never heard of. Like Malaysia. Yeah. Well, I mean, I've heard of Malaysia, but there'd be like cities I had never even heard of.
He would.
Well, we would go to these cities and he would have police escorts. They'd be like, they'd have red carpets rolled out for us at the hotel with drinks.
He is one of those artists.
Yeah, he's huge overseas. So, I mean, that was just being with him. And, we went all through Asia,
That's dope.
Going to the Philippines and going through London and Europe and all that. So touring with him was cool. And I just say that to say that sometimes being the only female, it kind of adds a little, changes the dynamic a little bit of just a group of 10 guys who are just sick of each other that have been on the road for weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes you can kind of, I guess, soften the mood a little bit. Mm-hmm. And, we had a lot of fun. Like, we used to go work out every morning, go run. So that was a cool experience. So I think definitely, being a female, I mean, you can always, you always use it to your advantage to, it's a little easier for you to slide in the get on. It's all about getting access. Mm-hmm. So, if you need to get on the tour bus, or you need to get in the dressing room to get the shots you need, or, to get the interview, it's easier to make it happen as a female, for sure.
Have you had any challenges, which is what I was going to ask you originally, gaining respect from women in hip hop community, in the hip hop community, as a white woman? Because I feel like nobody's probably gonna speak to that, but if you see women in the industry, a lot of them are Black women, especially when we're talking about the urban side of things. I mean, it's not just like that today, but I'm just saying, at the time, did you have any challenges?
They used to be funny with me at BET, like, we're not giving you a pass.
Not at BET.
No, I mean, but I would never come out and say that. I mean, I think there is, definitely there is a little bit of that, where being white, maybe I don't get, like, for what I've accomplished, maybe if I was Black, or if I was a man, maybe I would get a little more respect for my accomplishments. Mm-hmm. But I would never come out and say that, because, like, at the end of the day, like, I'm choosing to be in this industry, which is, where white people are a minority. So if I just wanted to be, I could have been an attorney or in pop music, space. Or, I understand, like, that I have more options because of just society. I had the option to really do anything. So, I'm choosing to be in this industry. So it just is what it is. And, I always just try to let my work speak for itself. And if people don't respect that, because I've had people, just little internet trolls or whatever, would be like, well, like, somebody commented one time, I don't remember, like, well, why did they let this white girl, who something about they, like as if someone had put me in this position. Like, well, why did they always have a white girl producing this award show or whatever? I'm like, well, there is no they. Like,
I did this.
I put myself in this position. You're Black. If you wanted to put yourself in this you
Position.
being the troll or whatever. If you wanted to be in this position to make it happen, like come and challenge me, take my spot, work harder than me. So,
Yeah, which is, I'm happy you said it, because I mean, the way I look at it is like you're a human being and you have done these things to put yourself in these positions. So I completely agree with that. You also speak to a lot of times, and I think you mentioned it a little early on when we were talking about being not necessarily, you didn't say underdog, but the person that you may not expect to come out on top. Why is being the underdog kind of a good thing versus the way some people see it as a bad thing?
I mean, that's a 48 law of power, I think, isn't it? I forget how it's worded, but yeah, you want people to underestimate you, and it gives you an advantage.
Being an author, I imagine that you read a lot. What's the latest book that you've read that you might find insightful for someone else?
I've been reading this book, which I posted a quote from it on Instagram. I think it's called American Mania. I think that's the title of it. But it's about just how like overconsumption. And to me, the more I started traveling, like when you go overseas and you come back, it's just so blatant, like how we have so much extra food. We use so much packaging and plastic, and we use so much energy. We don't turn the lights off. We have these huge cars. We have these huge houses we don't really need.
Excessive.
Everything in America, compared to like when you really start to travel, you really see it, and you come back and you're like, we have so much that we don't need. And that's so true. It's just not sustainable long term. And so the book, it kind of, there's some parts where I'm kind of like, I don't know if I 100% agree with that, but it makes a lot of interesting points. And the author is basically saying that because we are a country of immigrants, like that there's a genetic component, like that the people who are here are the type of people who are more motivated to like go out and make changes in their life versus people who are kind of content, like being where they're at. They're still in the country that they're originally are from. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, there's some interesting. It's written by like a psychologist, I think, and a sociologist, and so it's interesting the direction that it goes. I like some of the topics.
Dope. What would you say to? Well, we know most recently you've worked on the J.Prince, The Art of Respect, his book, and actually that's the first time that I saw you. I wasn't able to introduce myself, but you were hosting the event at Tree Sounds. Yeah, so. Dope, amazing book. I've listened to it. I've read it. How has that experience been, being able to tell his story? Because I think a lot of people, he was like a mystery. Like you might have heard the name J.Prince and you know who that is. And I had the opportunity to talk to him too. But you could know who he is, but you don't really know J.Prince.
Right.
So like writing that story or like being a part of that and going to the book signings, how was that experience for you? How's it been?
Oh, it's been awesome. I mean, I've known Jay for a long time, and, just being able to kind of like shadow him, because when I was spending a lot of time in Houston, like I would, kind of be able to like tag along with him. And so he's another person that I learned a lot from, like just as far as business wise. So, I mean, there's been a handful of people like me coming into this industry as a white woman who's very sheltered. Like I didn't know how to, I don't know how to deal with certain types of people until I had people like my first partner, Mert, and Mert and Dogman would be like, they were in the office next to mine. I would watch how they get money out of street guys, and so I'm like starting to. So Jay was another person like that I can kind of learn from as far as like how to handle yourself in certain situations. That me coming from a totally different world, and so Jay was somebody I learned a lot from, and he had done because a lot of people are also confused about like, well, what does you have to do with this book or whatever. So he had done a draft with Jazzfly a couple years back, and I guess they had never completed or whatever. It was just kind of unfinished. And so he had approached me maybe like a year and a half ago. Actually, it was last year on my birthday. So he was like, "Hey,
when's your birthday?" Because a lot of things happen on your birthday.
In June, yeah.
In June, okay.
So well, we were just talking about it because it was exactly a year from like when we started the project to when it like came out.
Gotcha.
Basically. So he had hit me up like, come out to Vegas. So one interesting thing about working with him, like he never gives you like that much information. It's always like on a need to know basis. So
Right.
like you'll just get a like come to this city, you know, and then you don't really know what's gonna happen or who's gonna be there. Like it's always just
up in the air.
It's always just an adventure. So I went out to Vegas. We talked about this book, and so I kind of helped. I helped develop it and take it from like a rough draft to like a finished product. And then also, you know, on the distributing side, like we did it all, everything's done in-house. So we don't have a publisher. Like we created our own, you know, publishing situation, distribution. So I kind of took everything I learned doing the Pimp C project, which I've self-published. And there's so many avenues now that you can self-publish. You know, it's not like you have to have a publisher now.
That's true.
And so I just helped him, you know, take it from A to Z as far as finishing it and putting it out, and then put together this promotional tour. And, you know, our timing on that was great because the whole Drake and the whole Drake and Pusha T thing actually happened like the day before we were set to start our promo tour. So we're like, I mean, hey,
it works.
You know, yeah. So everybody wanted to talk to him. So it made my job very easy. So you know, I've been kind of coordinating, you know, all of our release parties and book signings and you know, just doing press. So
congrats on that.
And he works hard. You know, he's I've worked with a lot of artists. You know, not everybody's down to do a interview that ends at, you know, or be at the club till 3 a.m. and be at the radio station at 6. You know, but he's willing to work. So he's great to work with, and you know the kind of people that he attracts as well. You know, we went and did an interview, and you know Colin Kaepernick came just to meet him.
Yeah.
And, you know, so just you know Ice Cube came out to one of our events. So the people the caliber of people that he attracts, you know,
awesome.
it definitely puts me in the room with a lot of interesting people. So.
That's dope. Yeah. Congrats on that. I really
and the book is a bestseller. So the art and science of respect. Got to get that plugged in.
Yeah, no, it's an amazing book. I encourage everyone, and I need to read in full the Pimp C's Trill life story too. What would you tell your 20-year-old self today?
Oh, I might have to think about that one. I don't know. I don't have really regrets. You know, I don't know that there's too much I would have done differently. But maybe just give a little. It's gonna get better. You know, it's gonna
work out. Yeah.
Those are the broke days.
Which is why I asked, because like, I mean, I feel like a lot of people who listen to our podcast, or I know a lot of people that listen to our podcast, and even myself, are in those like early days of our careers, whatever it may be.
Well, it's funny because like it's I mean, it gets better when you can afford stuff, but then you look back and you're like, those were really some great times. Like it really is about the journey. Like I've read an interview with an artist. I can't even think of who it was, but it wasn't a hip hop artist, but somebody asked him like, it might have been Lionel Richie.
Oh,
I think. Yeah, it was an interview with him, and so they were asking him about, at the time, like he was, you know, I guess at the top of the pop world or whatever, and they were like, so how does it feel, you know, to be at the top? And he said something to the effect of like, well, there's nothing at the top. Like the only thing at the top is like all the experience you had to get there. And I was like, That's really true. Makes sense, you know. So you have to appreciate those, like when you are starting out and you know you don't have money, or you know, it really makes you it forces you to be creative. You know, the necessity is the mother of invention type of thing. I mean, most of the stuff I know now, like if I had been able to afford to pay someone to do it, I wouldn't have learned, you know. So
exactly.
It kind of forces you to be creative, to expand your skills and
be resourceful.
Exactly, be resourceful and because I said that to somebody recently, a girl at the airport. I think she was like, well, I can't, you know. She asked where I was going, and I said I was going to I don't know, Dominican Republic or something. And she was like, oh, I wish I could travel or whatever. I'm like, well, you can. I mean, and that's a misconception that you have to have money to travel. And I told her, I was like, some of my best trips were like broke trips. Like,
yeah, most of my trips have been the best when I didn't really have much. Just like going there, figuring it out. And
you're a female, so you know you usually can. You don't want to put yourself in a bad situation, but you can usually find a place to lay your head if you really have to. You know, so yeah, I've had some really great broke trips back in the day. You know, those make the best stories.
Yeah,
so.
for sure.
Yeah.
What are you working on now? What would you say after really we've gone through your whole journey at this point? What would you say has been your why this whole time? Like, and what would you say it is today? Like the why for everything you do.
I'm trying to figure it out. I just it's all an adventure. So whatever's the new something I haven't done, then
that's what it's going to be.
That's what's going to be. So yeah, I've enjoyed working with J.Prince, and we're talking about some other, keeping the movement going as far as on the publishing side. So we'll see what happens with that. I love to read, so that's right up my alley to be working on the publishing side and be able to have a lot of creative control and all that. So aside from that, I love to experience new things. So I'm just came back from South Africa. That was my first time over there. That was a cool trip. So
what were you doing out there? Just visiting, touring, or?
Yeah, nothing specific, but Angela Yee had an event she was hosting over there, so I kind of tagged along. And I have a lot of friends who do cool stuff in different countries. I'm always trying to hop on somebody's trip and go explore the city and whatnot. So
dope. Yeah, I saw you petting lions and tigers and bears. Oh my! So I'm like, she's having a great time. Yep. Well, congrats again with everything, and thank you so much for sitting down with me.
Yeah, for sure.
Just giving me your time. Tell them where they can find you.
So all social media is Julia Beverly, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, you can just Google her name and everything will come up. Thank you so much again. I hope you enjoyed yourself today.
Yeah.
Got you off your adventure, really, because you're always moving around.
Yeah. So thanks for having me, and Google me. You can find all.
Google me.
Find all the good stuff.
As always, you can find this podcast at at IDM Podcast, and myself on all social media platforms at Sammy Approved. Thank you again, Julie.
Yeah.
Sonic.